Hello and welcome. It's March 8th, 2017. Trade deadline was a week ago. That means it's the annual Puckleheads trade deadline special. Marcus White joined, as always, by the wonderful, the lovely Conall McNeilis. Conall, how you doing today?
Good, Marcus. I think it's kind of nice, actually. We've had a week to take in these trades a little bit. Really not get too emotional or too fed up with them. Of course, the NHL decides to ruin our fun, Marcus, and make all the good trades a couple days beforehand. So as we talked about in our last special, we had Ian on with us. So, but still, always excited. Is he? Hold on a second. Yep. All right, Christian. Christian just came in, just flew in. For folks who don't know, he's about to film a new film. He's a method actor, so he's not going to be on camera. He doesn't want to give away his new role, but he's really
Christian Bale. That is Christian.
Oh,
Bale.
Christian Bale. Yes, of course.
The actor.
For those who don't know, this is an annual thing, so hopefully you guys have picked that up. But he's always, as always, just a pleasure to join us, and is going to help us really go over the trades here, Marcus. And
yeah. Christian's always been a trade deadline expert. We go to, and we love to go to him. We go to him yearly. I'll give a quick plug. If you haven't listened to our show from last week, please do. I think it's probably the best hour and a half that Conall and I have ever done with the Puckleheads. So give it a listen. This is going to pale in comparison, but we're going to have a lot of fun with Christian Bale. He doesn't want to appear on camera, as you mentioned, doesn't want to give anything away about his appearance. Also, it would have cost a lot more money to book him for that. So his observations are pertaining solely to the trades from the NHL trade deadline. So I guess we're going to get started, with one of the first trades. Wasn't at the deadline per se. It was actually, a day or two before. That's the Martin Hanzal and Ryan White going to Minnesota for a package of picks, including a first and a second rounder. I guess let's have our special guest lead it off. Christian, what do you think of the move?
Fucking second. The fuck are you doing?
Oh, wow.
Wow. Okay.
I'm very happy with that pick. Christian's really been on the Minnesota Wild bandwagon this year, but he hasn't been pleased with this pick. Marcus, do you agree with Christian, or are you on the other side of the train here?
Yeah, listen, I don't think I'm ever going to use language that strong on a broadcast like this. I think that's, we've got to talk to him about that. That's 3 years in a row now. He's really vanity.
Listen, he's an
yeah, this was a little nonsensical to me. You see how Hanzal can help this Wild team. He gives them proper depth down the middle. Everybody slots in and fills in the right spot. They probably have, I'd say probably second best center depth in the West, just behind San Jose. I think it's probably a lot closer than it may have been last year, given how Joe Thornton's performing this year and how he's aged. But that's a lot to give up. I understand we want to go for it. We want to send our team the right message, yada, yada, yada. Hanzal was probably the best center available, so they had to pay a premium for him in terms of that. But if you're a team like Minnesota and the price is that steep for a Martin Hanzal, wouldn't you rather just pay whatever extra it is to get Matt Duchene or another, a center, a player like Matt Duchene who's going to be under contract beyond this year and is there more of an impact guy than Hanzal? It certainly helps their depth, and I think, for their roster, it's a good move. But anytime you give up a first-round pick, and especially knowing how we've seen Bruce Boudreau teams do in the playoffs, excuse me, that pick may not be that late. That might be 20s. And that's not to rip Bruce Boudreau. That's just, based on prior work. So yeah, that was probably the most head scratching trade for me at the deadline. So I tacitly agree with Christian here, but not with quite the same venom.
Well, like I said, Christian's a passionate guy, but I agree in that. So it's a first and a second, and then there's a conditional pick. And if they make it to the conference finals, that turns into another second round pick. So it could wind up being 2 seconds and a first for, 15, 20 games of Martin Hanzal. And then you hope you make that run to the, at least the conference finals if you're Minnesota. Minnesota's a team though, Marcus, if there's any, there's any defense to be had there, it's that when you look at it, they are somewhat of a veteran team already with guys like Parise and Suter and their captain Mikko Koivu, and even Devin Dubnyk, who's been such a great find, is already in closer to 30 than you would maybe like. It's a team that kind of does need to have a little bit of urgency, so I can understand that. That being said, I'm with you. If you're going to pay that premium, if you're going to give up a first and potentially 2 seconds, you might as well throw in another prospect, Marcus, and go out and get Matt Duchene. I mean, at that point, you might as well. Hell, I'll just give me 2 firsts in a prospect or 2 firsts in a second. If you're going to give up that much, I'm with you. Give me the younger guy. Give me the guy who's under contract. Give me the guy who could potentially help you long term and, keep you relevant. Hansel, in all likelihood, I don't know if you're going to be able to re-sign him at the end of the year. There's not a ton of cap space in Minnesota. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Not from that they couldn't use the help. It was just from the premium. But at that point, Marcus, supply and demand is the trade deadline. We always see these GMs seem to do wild things as we get closer. No pun intended there. But it's wild transactions as we get closer. And if you compare it to like early season transaction or off season transactions, the prices always seem to be lower. So great. I mean, it's a good move from Arizona's standpoint. It's still a young team that they're built for, years down the line. They get a couple draft picks out of it that could always help them. And like you said, and if it turned out to be a letdown, as a lot of Bruce Boudreau's playoff performances have seemed to be, that could actually turn out to be, early 20s pick and then a nice second round pick as well. So I'm with you there. Christian, obviously not happy with it, but we'll go to the next trade, Marcus. Probably the biggest trade of them all, if we're going to talk about it. It's got to be the Shattenkirk to the Capitals. Capitals trade Zach Sanford and Brad Malone, as well as a 2017 first and a 2019 conditional pick that could potentially turn into a second as well there. For Kevin Shattenkirk and all his Phoenix Copley, who's a minor league player.
Who they traded for Oshie.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's right. They brought him back from the Oshie trade, so clearly know the organization. Christian, thoughts on this trade from honestly both sides?
Oh, good for you. And how was it?
It was good. I think it was pretty good.
It's a good trade. Yeah, I think it's a good
I agree, Christian. Good trade on both parts, Marcus. To me, I know it's tough for the Blues, who still have a decent chance of making the playoffs. To me, Marcus, a lot to do with Colton Parayko. This guy is going to be a stud. I think you really want to reinvest that money into Parayko for a potentially long-term deal. I'm going to bring up general cap friendly here just to make sure the Parayko deal. I'm not sure if he's a RFA this year or next year. But that being said, it didn't look like they were going to keep him long-term. And I think this is a smart move that a lot of GMs, Marcus, are seemingly reluctant to make, in that they want to hold out hope that maybe they could make a magical run and they get a hot goalie and all this. Shattenkirk wasn't staying there. He's wanted to come out east. Boston and the Rangers are on his radar. But listen, we talked about before the show. I mean, if he makes a run with the Caps, you could feed Ovi for a few more years and keep racking up those stats. I can't blame you at all there. But that being said, I think this has a lot to do with Parayko, who I'm bringing this up now. Yeah, he's an RFA this year, Marcus, and he's 23, and we're seeing less and less bridge deals. I think there's a chance they're going to take that money, reinvest it to him, try to lock him up long term. But a good trade for both of them. And then the Caps, you know what? They have a lot of UFAs, Marcus. Haven't gotten past the second round with Alex Ovechkin being there since 05-06. They need to. I mean, if I said they made this trade, it's cup or bust for the Capitals. They are all in. They have probably maybe the deepest blue line, at least on the right side in the league right now. Their forward group is as deep as it's ever been. Firing all cylinders, all in for them, Marcus. I'm okay with both sides of this trade.
I love this trade for the Capitals, as you mentioned, going all in here. I really don't think, and this could be selective memory here, I don't think they've ever really gone all in like this.
No, I haven't seen the Capitals throughout the years. I would agree with that statement.
I mean, they got Yaro Halak 1 year, and they got Sergei Fedorov another year, and he ended up having a nice little end to his career there. But like I said, I love this deal. For the Caps, they're going to have some headaches this offseason regardless in terms of some of their cap space. Kuznetsov's an RFA, Oshie's a UFA, Justin Williams is a UFA. They can reset with a lot of guys, and I think they have some contracts that are pretty movable. Marcus Johansson only signed for $4.58333. Not a bad deal. Certainly, probably a movable deal. He doesn't have
I would agree.
He doesn't have any kind of no movement. I think they're praying that Brooks Orpik gets claimed in the expansion draft by the Vegas Golden Knights, because if he does, I mean, Shattenkirk staying there, if Washington figures out their cap space, he's got to, and if they're interested in keeping him, I know there's all the talk about him wanting to go back to New York, and I think, honestly, all three New York teams would make sense for him to varying degrees. The Devils need a defenseman, the Rangers need a defenseman, and the Islanders all need a defenseman. So if he wants to go home in that sense, he could. But Washington's not far away either, and not a bad way to spend your last few months before free agency. He even said he was pretty surprised Washington traded for him. I like it from the Blues perspective too. I think you don't see it enough with teams. I think it's rare to see a GM not admit that they're done, but you say, okay, we're not going to keep this guy. Let's get what we can.
Yeah.
And Doug Wilson did that a few years back with the Sharks, trading away Douglas Murray, Ryan Clough, and the Sharks ended up going to a Game 7 in the second round. The Blues are still a good team. I think, you mentioned Colton Parayko. They can now pay him. They still have Alex Pietrangelo. Losing Shattenkirk definitely hurts, but they like Sanford, and they like the draft picks coming away with it. But, man, Washington is all in. They do not have a single pick in the first 3 rounds of this draft in 2017 coming up. And if there's a draft to do it, from what we're hearing,
yeah,
it's not a great draft, although I'm curious, and after reading some stuff, I wonder how much of that just means, it's not a great draft at the top, and how much really changes outside the top 10 from year to year. So I love it for Washington. Go all in. I think this makes them the team to beat, both in the Metropolitan, in the East, and additionally in the NHL. It's hard for me to see a team beating them this year. But now that I've said that, a team probably will beat them.
Yeah, as we know, as the Carolina Hurricanes still curse us to this day. My all-time favorite, tank mush moment over here. But yeah, good trade for both parts. And obviously Christian agrees with us. It's always nice to agree with Christian. We don't want to make him too angry here. He's an intimidating guy, but he's a good guy. He's good. Christian saying, Christian wants to move on to the next trade. I got you, Christian. My bad. Next one, Christian is going to go over. I talked to him briefly on the phone a couple of days ago, and he just didn't really seem to understand this one. This was the Alex Burrows trade with Ottawa trading for Alex Burrows, giving up one of their top prospects, whose name I'm trying to find I don't want to mispronounce his name here.
Dahlin.
What is it?
Jonathan Dahlin.
Jonathan Dahlin.
Dahlin's kid.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. Pretty good trade there if you're Vancouver, you're trying to get young. Alex Burrows has been great for them for years. But then not only did Ottawa give up a pretty good prospect to get this guy who's, 35 years old, they then decided to give him an extension. Christian, thoughts on this trade?
Can understand what it's like working with actors. That's what that is. That's what that is, man. I'm telling you.
Oh, wow.
They don't know what it's like working with actors. That is clearly what that is. And we're having some technical difficulties here as Conall rejoins us now.
I'm back. Sorry,
Christian was so really angry
for a second. Hit the mic. It was craziness in here for a moment. Calm down, Christian. Christian says from experience working with actors, they don't know what that is, Marcus. They don't know how to handle that. I think
we're not talking about actors. We're talking about players here.
Yeah,
I think it's a metaphor too.
I think it's a metaphor.
I think it's an apt metaphor because, man, if you're giving Alex Burrows a 2-year contract extension before you trade for him, my first question is why?
Why?
I think that's probably the only way he was going to Ottawa, was if he got a contract extension, and good for him to leverage it. Like you mentioned, the guy's 35. He could retire after this year, and that money would still be on the books. I know people talk about Ottawa as a budget team, and they've done some things, and I think that's true to an extent. I'm not saying that they don't have an internal cap, but looking at some of these moves, they just have
Marcus, Ottawa is a team
9 bottom 9 forwards plus 3, 12 bottom 9 forwards.
Ottawa's a team that I have no idea what direction they're trying to go to. I don't get it. And they clearly do not get what it's like working with actors and or hockey players or whoever you want to put it. Because every year they make a move. They got a guy I talk about Eric Carlson. Then they have a couple other players like Mark Stone, who's a nice little player. But then, even last year, trading Mika Zibanejad for an aging Derek Brassard now. Don't really get it. Trading for Dion Phaneuf. Don't really get it. Alex Burrows, as you said, they pretty much have maybe they have 2 top 6 forwards, and that's really it. I mean, what is this? I don't get what Ottawa's doing as a team. This trade makes 0 sense, and they give up, which, I'm not saying I know a lot about the guy, but apparently a pretty good prospect I know a bunch of hockey writers, Bob McKenzie, Jay Radick, a lot of guys were very surprised that Ottawa was willing to just part with this. It comes to bear in mind, Marcus. I mean, do they really think they're a legit contender?
The only player who scored at the rate Jonathan Dahlin is in the league he's in at that age was Philip Forsberg.
I mean,
just to give you a point of reference about Jonathan Dahlin. The only way this is remotely defensible is if you look at the rest of the contracts of their, quote unquote, bottom six forwards. Tommy Wingles, Victor Stahlberg, who they also acquired, Chris Neal, Jean-Gabriel Pajot, Chris Kelly, Tom Pyatt, and Ryan Dzingel. Their contracts are all up after this year. 5 of those guys are UFAs, and they could pretty easily hit the reset button on those. And maybe they wanted to have, an established player. I don't think $2.5 million for Alex Burrows is that much. Still for 2 years, and seeing the rate his scoring has declined. Not great. I'm more than a little confused by
I
this
think
deal.
that's the best word here. It's just really confused. I don't get, and I said, and it's been a long time coming with Ottawa. I just don't get the direction that they're trying to go to, and it's like they really don't have one. And as far as I'm concerned, they really don't have a direction. They're kind of just spinning in circles.
And most of their guys are on the wrong side of 27, like Bobby Ryan, 29, Derek Brassard, 29, Clark MacArthur, 31. Alex Burrows, 35. Kyle Turris, 27. Like, they're at their peak. And
then you look at their you can look at their goaltending too, Marcus. At that, right. A guy like Condon's not a legit NHL starter, and then Craig Anderson, who's had a nice little year here, has had a good.
He's 35.
35 years old. Like, real no direction. A weird mix of young and old, and not that talented of players, and some really talented players. I don't get it, and I agree once again with Christian. I think they just don't know what it's like working with hockey players.
Second year in a row, they brought on a guy that's probably too old with a no trade clause. They did Dion Phaneuf last year and Alex Burrows this year. They might win a playoff round because they're going to play Boston, and that's like the worst matchup in the playoffs.
Bizarre.
They're going to lose to whoever plays the Canadiens from the Metro and beats the Habs in 6 games.
That's pretty much how it's going to go, I think. As we move on to some other trades here, some moves, of course, by Stan Bowman, who always seems to have something up his sleeve. And also an upset Jamie Benn reportedly saying this to Jim Neal after trading Jordy. And Christian can relate to both of these. Christian, thoughts?
I want to fucking kick your fucking ass. Shut up for a second.
Whoa, okay.
Whoa.
Let's relax. Let's settle down.
That's again, Jamie Benn certainly didn't say that in the media. And if he did say it, it's behind closed doors. We haven't tapped his phones or anything. But I think Jim Neal, there's a good chance he probably said this to him at multiple points near the trade deadline. The first was Stan Bowman for giving up Johnny Oduya for basically nothing. The Stars aren't making the playoffs, and the Oduya is going back to his old team. But
how does it
really,
with the Blackhawks?
I'm sorry?
They get everybody back. Like, it's just like a cycle. It's just like
for nothing. They get everyone back for nothing, basically. Yeah. They did it with Andrew Ladd last year. Really didn't give up a whole lot. I don't get why people... What'd you say?
Sign Brian Campbell again. They just bring everybody
That's right. I don't get why why teams just keep helping Chicago. I really don't. They're in a great position. I don't think they're as good this year because you look at some of their underlying numbers. I think they've relied a lot on Corey Crawford, and I think he's a very good goalie. But that's a tough ask. And they're gonna play. They arguably have potentially the hardest matchup in the first 2 rounds, playing Nashville first round, Minnesota second round. That's as tough of a road to the conference finals as anybody has. But of course, all these teams keep helping them. So my only explanation is that Stan Bowman is threatening other GMs by saying that he's gonna effing kick their effing A.
There's a decent chance.
And I think there's a decent chance Jamie Benn said that after his brother got traded. He didn't
probably a little bit upset.
He didn't seem super stoked that Jordy Ben got traded. He's probably happy he's on a playoff team. But maybe Mark Bergevin said that to Jim Neal as well. See that made a little more sense. The Oduya trade on the Ben trade on the whole makes sense. They do have some young defensemen, so they want to integrate them. perfect, do that. But really trading within your division to Chicago, I mean, I think Oduya might have had a no move, but I still think you could have found a contender that, wasn't Chicago.
Yeah, to me,
I guess Stan Bowman's got blackmail on everybody, or he threatens them. That's the only explanation.
I think Christian is saying that he threatens people. And what Christian Bale says goes as far as I'm concerned. As we move on to another GM who seemingly just pulls off trades left and right, but maybe for the opposite reason, Marcus. We look at Steve Yzerman in Tampa, who did some great work moving Filppula, and then also acquiring Mark Streit, then moving Mark Streit again, also getting rid of Brian Boyle. Another guy, not afraid. He knows the cap constraints he's going to have going into next season with some big RFAs coming up. Another guy, Marcus, who we talked about earlier with St. Louis, was willing to make some trades and willing to move guys he knew he wasn't going to keep long term. And I think that's something that a lot of GMs are hesitant about, but he did a great job with it, Marcus. And Christian, I mean, what do you think about Steve Yzerman, and what do you think other people around the league are saying to him, why they're making so many trades?
You're a nice guy. You're a nice guy. But
yeah. I think
they are saying that to him.
I think Steve Yzerman does seem like a nice guy. And like I said, guys, Marcus, he's not going to keep. And, he's probably said that to Brian Boyle as he was trading him at the door. You're a nice guy. You're a nice guy, Brian, but we're going to move on from you. And I think that's what more GMs need to have as their approach when they're looking at players, is that unfortunately you're not going to be able to keep everyone throughout these years. And Tampa, I think, is still, despite their down year, I still think they're in decent position going forward with their young talents. But like you said, Tyler Johnson, Palat, RFAs. Jonathan Drouin, an RFA. You look at the back end, Andre Schuster, an RFA. So there's some guys that are going to have to sign here. Obviously, they moved to Ben Bishop, which was, I think, the smart move. You weren't going to keep him long term. They'll also have a couple contracts that you're interested with. Ryan Callahan, who one of my favorites, unfortunately, looks like his career is taking a dark path here with all these injuries he's accumulated. You wonder if they're able to move a contract like that, or something happens. Maybe he's a long-term IR guy. But good for Steve Yzerman for being a nice guy and being able to pull off these trades, but at the same time being smart and realizing, you know what? Sometimes you got to move on from guys you want to keep and who have been a good part of your team for the last couple of years too.
Yeah, last year Jonathan Drouin might not have said that about Steve Yzerman after he forcibly kept him in Tampa Bay. And I think the other GMs certainly like working with him because he's always peddling. It's going to be interesting to see who they try and move. I think they'd love for somebody to take the Braden Coburn deal off their hands. Yeah. 3.7 for each of the next 3 years. He's 32 and he has a no trade. Yikes. Alex Killorn as well. I think they look back on that one and they're like, what were we thinking?
Doesn't seem like he has, at least according to cap friendly, he doesn't have any no movement clauses though. So I think that's what you can. And he said Alex Killorn, I mean, it's a little bit long. It's a pretty long contract, but 4.45. Not an obscene cap hit, still 27. I'm sure some team will willingly take him. That's a contract that's going to get traded like twice.
Yeah, before it ends.
It's going to get traded.
One team will try and reclaim him and it won't work, and then the next team, the next team will try and retrade him. But I think Steve Yzerman has, he's got good relationships around the league, and I think that's part of the reason he's able to do this. I think, I think he's in a position where he had to make these trades, and he didn't get a ton for them. Although he got a second round pick from this past year's draft in the Ben Bishop trade.
I think Marcus, there's a reluctance with a lot of GMs that they want to get something. He realized that he wasn't going to get much for Bishop, so he's like, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. If that fourth round pick even turns into a roster player for 5 years, it's for 2 years. It's worth it to me. I think you have to look at it in a long-term picture, and he's not the goalie of the future. There's no use in keeping him around. They get Peter Budaj, so in the event that they do go to the playoffs and they need a backup, he's played pretty well this year, former AHL All-Star, as we saw him last year in Syracuse. He's a good player, and I think there is such a reluctance to just take on some contracts. Like Mark Streit, he said he didn't get a lot out of this. You know what? He got rid of some contracts, which is going to help him down the line in the future as far as re-signing players. I think it's okay. And I wish more GMs would have that approach, because I think it would be a better run league, frankly.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think coming up another trade, a couple of trades that kind of surprised me. The New Jersey Devils really not getting very much other than mid-round picks for some of the veterans they traded. P.A. Parento, arguably one of the best players traded with it. It's certainly one of the most versatile players traded within the last couple of days. And you see some of the prices for like Yannick Hansen, and you're like, well, couldn't P.A. Parento have gotten more? I know he's a trading camp invite. Vern Fiddler, the same thing. So I think we got to talk about the Devils. Christian, what do you think about the Devils in there and Ray Shero and what they've done at the trade deadline this year?
He does not get it. Good adjustments.
Wow. Strong words from Christian and his assistant chiming in as well, mentioning good adjustments. Not sure where he's coming from there. Yeah, the Parento one really kind of surprised me. I mean, David Poyle continues to be arguably the best GM in the league with the moves he pulls off. I mean, a sixth for P.A. Parento, that he's going to slide in anywhere along their top 9. He makes them deeper. I just think seeing some of these prices, I know Parento's a winger and he's not a center, but seeing what the Sharks gave up for Yannick Hansen with a former first round pick and a fourth that's a conditional first if they win the cup, I got to think you could get more than a pick in the last 3 rounds for P.A. Parento. Like you're getting more for Vern Fiddler than P.A. Parento.
I think that he does not get it can be applied to a lot of the GMs in this league that just don't.
Yes.
Don't understand. I think it goes into which hopefully we could touch in our next one of our next segments. We talked about doing our advanced analytics little video with Ian. But as far as measuring talent, I mean, P.A. Parento is a guy is I would consider him, Marcus. I think you agree. I'm not gonna say a top 9 forward, if you will.
Yes.
A guy that ideally is a perfect third line right wing. Okay, it has some up-end skill, can maybe, in a full season score 35 points in your third line and be a power play guy, which is awesome in today's NHL, but has the ability to move up into your top 6 in a limited role. If, there's a 10-game stretch or someone was injured, he could do it. You wouldn't want him there for maybe a full 82, but listen, in the playoffs, small sample size, Marcus, he could slide up and down that role. For a 6th-round pick. And he said he talked about overpaying for guys like Vern Fiddler or Alex Burrows or whoever you want to bring up. Steve Ott. I mean, all these guys who Steve Ott, Marcus, also went for a 6th-round pick. Okay.
Yeah. So it's still 28, a 2018 6th, so a little later, but still the same round.
That concept. You don't really understand what the concept is as far as judging talent, and I hope we hope that changes throughout hockey here and helps with the guys. A skill guy like P.A. Parento, who has always just kind of bounced around the league, but has still been a very effective player when he's given a shot at some good years with the Islanders and Montreal as well. A lot of these guys don't seem to get it. I think Christian's rant there could really apply to multiple parties.
He's had one season where he hasn't scored more than double-digit goals. He scored 8 in 56 games. That was the lowest shooting percentage of his career, other than his rookie year. His rookie year with the Rangers, he had 3 goals in 22 games. So all the seasons he's played in 483 games in the NHL since 2009-10, he has 2 seasons where he scored less than 10 goals. Again, he scored 41 points last year with Toronto, and we didn't see him get traded last year. I know he's small, his plus minus isn't great, but it continues to amaze me. And you see teams like Nashville get it. They're moving towards what we saw last year with Pittsburgh and just assembling a lot of cheap depth around your top end guys. I think it's a great move for Nashville. I think he's going to fit in with them pretty seamlessly. He'll fit in with Laviolette as well. I mean, I agree. I think he does not get it, can apply to a lot of guys. And now, he has had some injury issues, but he played 77 games last year. He's played 59 this year. He had a little bit of an injury that before he got traded to Nashville, and maybe that's why. But I mean, I know he was a small injury that's going to keep him out an additional couple of days. To me, doesn't really explain or justify slipping to a 6th-round pick. That was a head scratcher, not for Nashville, but for everyone else in the league, that P.A. Parento could only fetch a 6th-round pick. I was certainly surprised.
I was too, and I think it goes for a lot of the league as far as judging talent here, Marcus. Overall, though, Marcus, maybe a bit of I'm not going to say disappointing, but a little underwhelming of a trade deadline. Not as exciting as we maybe would have wanted. Obviously, the Shattenkirk one was a big trade, but I think, like as we talked about, it kind of worked out well for everybody.
Yeah, I think that was really the only big blockbuster. The biggest non-move, I think, was Duchesne and Landeskog staying put in Colorado. Some of the insider talk seems to be that they're going to move this summer. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was listening to the NHL Network or Network Radio recently, and Frito was talking about it. But, talking about how there's almost going to be a second trade deadline in June right before the expansion draft, and that one could be probably the more exciting one because you have a lot – and I'll give it to the loser point here, the NHL parity with all these teams still in the race. A lot of teams, more reluctant in the past than past years to really give up assets, I think, Marcus, and really, declare themselves sellers, if you will. But I think once the season's over, expansion drafts comes in, I think then you could really see some interesting moves. You would talk about Alex Killorn before. I think that's a guy who could really get some feedback around that time period, especially with Yzerman trying to free up some more cap space. Obviously, Duchesne and Landeskog, does that carry into July, or do they get moved beforehand? And then a lot of the guys, Marcus, we talked about, who have no movement clauses, no trade clauses, do guys like that get bought out? Do they wind up getting moved? You talked about Brooks Orpik. I'll bring up, a Dan Girardi or someone like that with these big contracts. Do they wind up getting moved? Will that be the next trade deadline? Hell, maybe Christian will even join us for that scenario, Marcus. Wouldn't that be a little summer splash? We usually only see him once a year. He says he's giving me a little head nod. He's saying perhaps. There's no guarantees there. But
considering. That's
considering. It depends on his schedule.
Of course. It always does. We appreciate his flexibility. Real quick before we do wrap up here, Conall, who do you think now has the edge, so to speak, after the trade deadline? Has anything changed significantly for you in your view of contenders down the stretch?
As far as contenders go, I think the two teams have probably improved the most for two teams that I already thought were up there. And I think that's Washington, obviously. I think it's, frankly, their cup to lose at this point. I actually did like what Pittsburgh did on the blue line as well, Marcus. Ron Hainsey and a bunch, they've had a lot of injuries back there, and they addressed it. I mean, and it's all these puck-moving guys, like the addition of Trevor Daley last year. Pittsburgh seems to get what the trend is, not necessarily going after some big bruiser on the back end or a guy they could have traded for, like a Jordy Ben, let's say, who goes to Montreal. Pittsburgh makes some smaller moves. I like what they did. It makes a lot of sense to me. Other than that, Marcus, I said none of the trades were over the top. And so with that in mind, I don't think there's a ton of the power rankings aren't going to adjust too much. I think the only thing that really happens is Washington moved up a little bit more, and everyone else Pittsburgh jumped a little bit, and everybody else kind of stayed around where they were.
Yeah, I agree with that. We didn't touch on it, but I actually really liked what Pittsburgh was doing in terms of some of the defensemen. Sounds like I'm getting some feedback with my mic on your computer, so this is probably as good a time as any to wrap this up. I know Christian, we're keeping him a little longer than we should have. So anything you want to tease we're looking forward to down the stretch here, or, anything?
Fun time as always in the NHL season with the playoffs around the corner. I think you look at the Eastern Conference, that's about set in stone with the exception of the second wild card and maybe the 2-3 spots in the Atlantic. The Western Conference, I think I don't really see it changing. The only thing I could possibly see changing is Los Angeles getting hot and St. Louis dropping out. I think everything else stays the same there, Marcus. And then after that, it's seeding. And looking forward to hopefully we'll do one down the stretch, and obviously we'll do our playoff previews, but hopefully in a few weeks we'll get Ian back on, talk a little hockey analytics. That could be some fun. And hopefully educate our fans a little bit. We talk a lot about analytics on the show, but this is going to be a good opportunity for us to learn and hopefully them as well. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I agree. That should be a fun one. I think one thing I'm definitely looking to a little bit, seems Florida may be officially out of it. They've lost 3 games. They're 4 points back. As big of a shame as that would be, we didn't touch on the deal, but I loved the Thomas Vanek trade for them. I don't think they gave up much of anything. And if Yager retires, that's a guy who I could see staying there and fitting into their forward group quite nicely, even if he doesn't. I am pulling a little bit for for the Panthers to find their way. But I think the Islanders making the playoffs would be a great story too, because everybody had written them off at like 7 or 8 points this year, and now they're pretty firmly in a playoff spot. 3 points up on the Flyers, only a point up on the Maple Leafs, but they've played the same amount of games. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Maybe that'll keep John Tavares on the island or wherever the Islanders end up. So yeah, we'll be back soon. We'll probably talk about the stretch run a little bit, maybe delve into the Gary Bettman comments on the Coyotes arena situation. I starting to agree with you there as that situation continues to evolve. As always, thank you for tuning in, and our thanks for the 3rd year in a row go to Christian Bale for Joel. It looks like he's walking out
running out right now. He's got to grab a cab. He's got to get out of here. He's going right to Newark. So going right to you. Ubering? He's Ubering. Oh, smart. All right. That's good. Yeah. Smart decision. It's cheaper than a cab. All right. Christian's going to Uber real quick. So.
All right. Well, thank you as always for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time.